Welcome in, everybody, to Phantom Sports in collaboration with Sports and Money. I am Benjamin Parker. We continue to work our way through the offseason here, covering all kinds of NFL teams, looking at the divisions, doing some previews, and even in some instances, kind of looking back a little bit where it's relevant and important. Tonight, we have Lee McManus with us. Lee, it is a privilege to have you on board, man. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Ben. Hello.
Everybody, Lee writes for Phantom Sports, and we're doing videos for Phantom Sports, but Lee also writes a ton for Phantom Sports, covers the Dolphins, so he knows the Dolphins inside and outside. That's why we've got him here tonight. Lee, how long have you been studying and watching the Dolphins, man?
Before Dan Marino, even.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember when David Woodley and Don Strock were the quarterbacks.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah. It's been just a little while. I'm aging myself here. Obviously, I'm one of the older people on Phantom Sports. Excuse me. Yeah, it's been quite a while.
Yeah, that's a long time. I love the Dolphins logo, the franchise. I love the colors. I love parts of the history. Obviously, there's some parts of the history that are very disappointing, but to me,
we could spend a long time on fans' frustration with the Dolphins. If we wanted to make this video hours long, I don't think for the sake of people who probably aren't that patient, we'll let that go for another time.
Yeah, we'll save the heartache stories and the hard luck stories for a different video, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, it's a privilege to have you on board. I want to start with the Dolphins, just kind of, a 10,000-foot view. Where do you feel like the franchise is right now? Are you excited? Are you in wait-and-see mode? Are you kind of a little nervous? Is it time to clean house? Where do you feel the franchise is right now?
So I know in your AFC preview, I won't dwell on it too much in the AFC East. You mentioned you weren't a fan of Chris Grier, and let me be honest. I'm not a fan of his evaluations of the offensive line, especially. And we'll get more into that when we talk about Tua and why I think it's a little more difficult to know exactly where things stand with him because of some things such as the offensive line. But I think the bigger issue, Ben, if you look, I looked again just to make I was sure about this. Dolphins in 42 years before Stephen Ross was owner in 2008 had 7 head coaches. Since he's been the coach, if you count interims, it's been 7. That's 14 years.
Wow.
And so I think as much as we want to blame Chris Grier, I don't know how much of this is, hey, I got to sort of bend to the will of the owner so that I still have my job, and how much of this is really directly issues with him, Chris Grier, that is. And I think that's the problem Miami is facing, is that he's a little bit of an older owner who came from the business world, and as a business leader, you can just say, hey, we're going to do this and it's done. That's not how it works in football. And I don't think he's ever truly, as far as I can see, adjusted to that. And so he's, to me, a bigger issue than Chris Grier is. If you look at what happened between Flores, Grier, and Ross, so much of what went down there, if you and I did an article on Flores' lawsuit, and if you read into that, so much of what went down that he wasn't happy with Flores was between him and Ross. Ross trying to step in and push things the way he wanted it to, which Flores wasn't happy with. So yeah, I think the change at head coach, if Flores got off to another slow start this coming season, I believe was going to happen anyway, just because of the impatience of Stephen Ross. I wouldn't have trusted him to let Flores finish another season where he starts slow again. Now, to quickly go just into the past with Flores, where I think he had some real issues, was with the offensive coaching staff. There was a tremendous amount of turnover and churn in that staff. I don't think that helped Tua. I think his lack of belief in Tua didn't help Tua at all either. Part of that's understandable when he wanted Justin Herbert, but that's not who he had. He had Tua. So I think those kinds of things didn't help with all the offensive side of the ball defensively. He's an extremely sharp defensive mind. And I think that shows up in the fact that Pittsburgh picked him up to be part of their defensive staff. So that's pretty obvious to me. But Flores' feelings, I think if we're going to look at where he did fall short, were strictly in the offense. And I've heard so many players say they like the more relaxed atmosphere under Mike McDaniel. I think that's something that's just in Flores' personality. I remember there was one point where there was a reporter who laughed at something that happened at a press conference and he gave him a death stare. And that was actually a kind of a big deal among the press in Miami for a couple of weeks. So yeah, I mean, I think there probably is something to a player like Tua feeling a little freer and looser, especially when he has a coach who I think is going to do something, at least attempt to do some things that are going to benefit him. So yeah, I really feel that if we're going to break down the blame for what happened in the Flores mess that's going to be ongoing for a while, I think Flores would shoulder about 20% of it, Chris Greer between 30 and 35, and then Ross maybe half, because I just think he's too meddlesome.
It's a fascinating study. Talk to us about Mike McDaniel, because I'm sure a lot of people have kind of sort of looked him up, his background and all that. But talk to us about what strengths he may bring to the table. And then on the flip side, because everybody's got him, what weaknesses maybe he's going to have to adjust for over time?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with Mike McDaniel, I don't know how better to put this than this kind of move to really add to the offense doesn't happen unless Flores is gone. I was listening, I crashed and listened to a ton of podcasts on every team in the AFC East. And one thing that occurred to me while I was listening to this was Flores doesn't like, is it big on star players. I don't know that Tyreek Hill comes to the Dolphins unless Mike McDaniel is here. I don't know that Miami makes the big splashy moves a big splashy move. Connor Williams is not quite as splashy as Armstead. He's a solid guard, clearly. He's an upgrade at guard. And that's, again, we could talk for a very long time about Miami's offensive line woes. They've stretched back. They stretched back for many, many years. But I don't think those moves are made with Flores still there. So I think McDaniel was necessary, or some better offensive staff and coaching was necessary to find out what you really have in Tua. I think that's a big thing to consider. The biggest thing McDaniel can do for this entire team is improve the offensive line. And if you look where the offensive line was rated last year, it was dead last, according to Pro Football Focus. Dead, and only 3 teams, I've looked this up more than once, 3 teams made the playoffs with offensive lines that weren't ranked in the top half of the league. I believe it was Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and Cincinnati. That's the entire list. Pittsburgh was the lowest. So if he can, along with offensive line coach Matt Applebaum, who's I think is a very important hire to remember, can improve the offensive line. That'll improve the running game, certainly, which was 30th in yards gained last year. So you see that his offense is based on running to set up the pass. And so that's where his strength really lies, I think. And that's something that can definitely help Tua. I think there's a tremendous domino effect with that. I think as far as negatives, there are plenty of Dolphins fans who weren't happy that he kept Josh Boyer as defensive coordinator. I think they looked at Flores as the real leader of the defense. They probably weren't wrong. And there was the idea that where Flores took back the play calling on defense, Miami's defense improved in the second half of the season. I would push back on that just a little bit to say that, they also had a much easier schedule the second half of the season. So that's the truth of where they improved, probably lies a little bit in the middle there as well. But I think that's probably the biggest drawback fans have had, is questioning keeping the defensive staff intact. And there are some things we can definitely discuss about this team's defense that I think are, I'm expecting the defense to still be a top half of the league defense because of the players that are here, the players that are there in Miami.
Brings us to Tua Tagovailoa. You already mentioned him a little bit. How about the offensive side of the football? Do you think they have enough there this year to evaluate him?
If they don't, then I don't know when it'll ever happen that they do. Because if you look, this wide receiver group, if he's a serviceable quarterback, has a chance to be very good. I mean, Waddle thrived in an offense where he was read one every single offensive snap. Read two was Mike Gesicki. Read three was, that was it. There was read 1 and 2. I don't know that maybe Mac Hollins. Yeah, there's a drop off there that's pretty steep. No offense to Mac Hollins, he's a a decent fourth, maybe fifth option if you're going 5 wide, but he's no third read or second wide receiver read. Part of that was because Devontae Parker has had a difficult time his whole career just finding the field, being available. So yeah, I think this is the best wide receiver group in at least 20 years for Miami. I don't know that they've had a better 3 than Hill, Waddle, and Wilson in a long time. Gesicki is one of the better tight ends they've had in that period of time as well. He's, probably a notch below Pro Bowl tier. I think with these other 3 receivers, he has a chance to, maybe even make a Pro Bowl. So I think that's gonna be good for the offense, obviously, to have more reads for Tua that actually can. One of the big things that was a problem for this wide receiver group was just getting separation. Tua was throwing into extremely tight windows, windows that someone with Dan Marino's arm might have had some struggles fitting in all the time. So I think that's a huge thing, that they're going to have a lot more speed at receiver that can get separation. And the other thing for Tua is, if this running game and offensive line improve, to me, to even the top half of the league, it doesn't have to be, the Dallas Cowboys or Tampa Bay Buccaneers and at the very best in just one season. That's asking a lot, mainly because so many of these offensive linemen are so young. They had, other than one starter, Jesse Davis, their other four starters were all 25 years old or younger. And I think that's one of the reasons that it made so much sense to pick up Armstead and Williams. They needed veterans along the line. But the offensive line can start a really big-time domino effect where if it's better, the running game's better, that's play action for Tua, easier throws. So, yeah, this is if there's not a way to evaluate Tua after this season, there never will be. I'll just end by saying that.
Which brings me to my next question, and I'll let you decide what the metrics are. But how good does Tua Tagovailoa have to look this season in order for the Dolphins not to move on from him at the end of the season? You can decide how we measure that, but how good does he have to look?
It's so hard because the AFC, as you've mentioned many times, and as I've written many times, this might be the deepest AFC I can remember in a very long time. I look at Miami's schedule and I see 10 wins possible, but there's going to be such a collection of teams right around that mark that does somebody with even 10 wins get squeezed out this year? It's going to be such a difficult thing to evaluate just based on the win and loss record. That's one part of it. Completion percentage, Tua's completion percentage is going to be fine. If he doesn't have between 35 or 4,000 yards this season, I don't know when he is. I don't think Tua is a 5,000-yard passer, and I don't think this is the offense really that's run to set up the pass where he's going to be a 5,000-yard passer. So to me, if he's around 4,000 yards or so, between 35 and 4,000, with maybe between 25 and 30 touchdowns and not quite as many interceptions as he has last year, that's a success statistically. The big question comes in because if I'm looking at the AFC, the teams I consider out of it now are probably Houston, Cleveland, yikes, Jacksonville, and the Jets. There's your list. Everybody else is going to be fighting for a playoff spot or has the potential to fight for one. So that makes it so hard to evaluate right now. Usually there's more separation than this, even going into mini camp and training camp. But I would say outside the Bills and Chiefs, you could put 8 to 10 teams in a bag and just draw one out and go, they're making the playoffs. So that makes it a lot harder on the win-loss end, certainly, to evaluate.
It's going to be a crazy year in the AFC. We won't dive too deep into the Dolphins' win-loss record or projections. Just if you'll give me maybe a percentage, what do you think their percentage chance is that they might have a shot at the playoffs this year, given how hard it's going to be and given that they've got a new coaching staff?
I would say, as far as making the playoffs, I'm between 50 and 60 optimistic that they can be where they were at the end of last year. It comes down to the very end and then maybe a game or two where they're right there with a number of other teams. And 40, I'm a Dolphins fan, and I know what this has felt like so many times. So I'm fairly optimistic because of what I think. I think what Mike McDaniel can bring to Tua is what he really needs. And that is a better running game, a better offensive line. And as I said, if those two things fall into place, Miami can be right there for a playoff spot, because I still do believe that they have a solid core of veterans and some very, very good young players on defense. I don't think the defense, unless the coaching is absolutely terrible with the talent that's there, is going to slip that much. I really don't. And I think having a better running game certainly can only help the defense. They'll be on the field far less. So that to me is something to consider, that it's not just what the offensive line and running game can do for the offense. It's the fact that the defense will have to be on the field far less as well. And when you look at who's there on defense already, I think probably there's some depth issues on defense once you get beyond those starters. But if the majority of them stay healthy, Miami should have a solid unit there.
Let's end it by talking about the defense. Tell us some of the names that maybe we might not know about that we should know about, and where. Let's pick out a position group that you would say is the strength of the defense as well.
Oh, it's obviously secondary. I mean, when you have Javon Holland, Byron Jones, Brandon Jones, Xavier Howard, that's your obvious strength. I think it's been an obvious strength for several years now. Xavier Howard, that guy is he's a tremendous ball hawk. His one-on-one cover skills make him. We can argue about where he fits in the top five, but if we say he's not top five, something is wrong. He's one of the top five best corners in this league. He got paid to be one this offseason. I'm expecting him and the two Joneses and Javon Holland to form a very strong secondary. I think, to me, if you're asking me where the Dolphins could have improved some more, I think the Melvin Ingram signing was a good one, but I think he's probably a third down pass rush specialist. And I think he can help Jalen Phillips, who I think is another young name that came on at the end of last year. And certainly the Dolphins are expecting him to improve alongside Emmanuel Ogbah again this year. I think he can help Jalen Phillips' development. I think that'll be key because, for me, Brian Flores knows more about defense than you or I ever will, obviously. He was a key part of New England's defensive staff. But for me, he blitzed a little too much and left those corners and on islands a little too much. And I think you see it show up in the games along the lines of the Buffalo Bills. The Bills beat Miami 56-26 in one of the two or three biggest games that Brian Flores had. And you could just listen to the game. So-and-so is wide open down the field. If Miami didn't get it to the quarterback and get pressure, that was a huge problem. They finished fifth in sacks last year, which sounds great, but they finished middle in the pack in yards given up. And the gap there, I think, is because in some of the bigger games, they were giving up more down the field against, Patrick Mahomes type or a Josh Allen type of quarterback who could, elude the pressure and find Stephon Diggs or, Hill or Kelsey down the field. So I was hoping that Miami would do a little bit more at edge rusher and linebacker where they wouldn't blitz as much. I'm still hoping that Christian Wilkins might be able to supply a little more pressure on the inside. He's certainly grown into an excellent run stopper alongside Raekwon Davis. So I think if some young players here, Channing Tindall, I think is going to be essential to help the Dolphins cover tight ends, which has been another weakness of theirs over the years. If some young players can show some growth here, Miami should not slip and might even be a little bit better of a defense. My hope is that they don't blitz quite as much, have to blitz quite as much, and can find close to the same amount of pressure as they did under Flores.
We could talk about the Dolphins all night. We'll do it at a later date. We'll do a division video right after this for the fans to see as well. But tell everybody where they can find your work, and if you're on social media, where they can find you there as well.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Lefty Tiger Fan. And I am on Phantom Sports covering the Dolphins. I've done some other stuff as well, everything from, a little bit of basketball, touch of baseball, even some Winter Olympics on there. So there's a wide range of articles that I've done there. If they are interested in some other topics other than the Dolphins, obviously.
Well, Lee, thank you so much for being with us, man. We appreciate it tonight. Appreciate the insight on Miami.
And thank you, Ben. I appreciate the time.
All right, everybody. This is Phantom Sports. We are in collaboration with Sports and Money. We will see you next time. Have a great night. Bye.